Hey, hello everyone, welcome to another planning advisory service Fireside Chat. These are this is our platform that we use for catching up with people from the world of planning, discussing matters such as COVID-19 and how we continue to provide a good planning service for our customers during these times. So for this particular session, I'm really pleased to be joined by Clllr Tricia O'Brien, who's the Chair of Planning at Liverpool City Council, and her colleague Michael Jones, who's the Deputy Head of Democratic Services at Liverpool City Council. Tricia, can you hear me? Can you just say hello?
I can hear you. Hi to
and
everyone.
Michael, can you hear us?
See this?
Can indeed, Martin. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So Liverpool, in line with many councils, have tried to keep things going as normally as possible and have gone ahead with virtual planning committees. Michael, if I could start with you. You had a virtual planning committee yesterday, but I understand that that wasn't your first one.
That's right, Martin. It's actually been an iterative process over the last 3 to 4 weeks, if I'm honest, which Trish will touch on shortly. The first stage we took was actually prior to the new regulations come into force. We were conscious that the volume of planning applications coming through our systems was significant, and there was desire from obviously members of the public, applicants and agents for the process to continue. And we were then looking at opportunities to how to balance the need to keep the process going forward whilst maintaining the involvement of members and the public. So the first step we actually took was to use some of the emergency powers in our scheme of delegation, which actually allows our chief executive in exceptional circumstances to make decisions. But we were particularly sensitive to the fact that members are at the heart of local democracy and are key decision makers.
Yeah.
So in consultation with the chair of planning committee and our head of planning, we introduced an interim solution whereby we held a virtual video conference, which essentially comprised all the members of planning committee and all of the planning officers, and to which we took detailed written representations from agents and members of the public for a detailed list of applications. Members went through those over a number of hours in great detail, from which a series of recommendations were developed. And those ultimately formed the basis of the decisions made by the chief executive at that stage. And at all stages, we were publishing those to our website so the public could see that members were still looking at applications, that the members' views were being taken into account, that the public were being heard clearly, and that everyone having full opportunity to comment on those applications. So that was the first stage we looked at prior to the regulations coming in.
And Tricia, how were you involved at that stage?
Well, I was very, very keen to keep the planning committee being seen as open, democratic, transparent. So I was never in favour of excluding planning committee members from the decision-making process, which I knew was a possibility. We could have centralised decision-making. But we already are viewed with some suspicion. I think the same probably in any city. They think that we're not listening to the public a lot of the time and that we are making our planning decisions separate from that, which has never ever been the case. And I just thought if we gave you know, a more closed process of the thumbs up, we'd be suspected even more of that lack of transparency. So I was very keen to do anything that we could to have virtual planning meetings, proper meetings with all the members involved and all our officers giving us advice in a public forum. Of course, we always get our agendas, but nobody can see if you've read that agenda. And when you vote on a process that the members of the committee, you know, are doing that fully informed, having that forum of a planning committee shows people that that's the case. So I was very keen to have these virtual planning meetings and was really prepared to try out more or less whatever was recommended.
Okay, so that initial approach was an interim, I guess. Have you had a smooth start to your planning committees, Michael?
Well, it's not without challenges, which I suspect will be the case across almost all local authorities across England and Wales. The solution we went for initially was Microsoft Teams as a product. We looked at other options as well, including Zoom and Skype, for example, but we decided to focus on Teams initially simply because of the security aspect and ensuring that we could have a single consistent approach, and then obviously we didn't take any risk of any interruption of live feeds, for example. The first approach we did was to schedule a meeting for the 28th of April. And the first way we did it was to hold this as what's known as a Teams live event. What that caused for us on the actual day was a number of technical issues, which up until that point we weren't aware were going to happen. But essentially, we'd had over 30 members of the public register to speak. And on the day of trying to come and join the meeting, they were struggling to authenticate and join, which was a feature of a Teams live event, which for security purposes is understandable, but what it did was preventing a number of people from participating. So with that technical challenge ongoing, and to avoid any confusion or disenfranchising any member or indeed member of the public, we took the decision after half an hour in consultation with the deputy chair to effectively adjourn the meeting.
What in a nutshell was the technical problems? I think that'd be interesting for others to understand.
The technical problem was quite simple, really, as it turned out. The original concept we were going to use was just a straightforward Teams meeting. And by doing that, you can issue a diary or calendar invitation to a member, an officer, an agent, or member of the public externally. That member officer can then just click on the link and join the meeting as an invited participant. With a Teams live event, what it effectively required you to do was to add in password authentication, confirming identity and steps. It was too complicated, and it was an understandable suggestion from Microsoft, but actually the simpler solution of an ordinary Teams event was actually what was needed, and that's ultimately what we're now doing. By way of recapping slightly, after we had the initial attempted meeting on the 28th of April, we went back to Microsoft Teams, reviewed it, and we rescheduled it for the 5th of May. We scheduled that as an ordinary Teams meeting, but with that Teams meeting being live streamed through another piece of software to our website. So that was then visible on our YouTube channel and fully on our website as well. That took place, went really, really well and positively, which I'm sure Trish can comment on. But certainly we had over 50 participants, members, officers, agents, members of the public, all able to join the meeting successfully, all able to speak and be seen. And it was a really productive use of the meeting. And it proved the virtual technology worked.
Excellent. Okay. So Tricia, so you've actually chaired 2 meetings then?
Including
3.
that very first one, which
Okay,
all the decisions made there had to be ratified by the chief exec. I've chaired 2 where really they are more or less the same as a planning committee, but virtually. So I've chaired all of those. And
what would you say the key challenge in the virtual scenario is as opposed to normally?
I think it is to have all the lists of people clear so that you know who's supposed to be coming on next and orchestrate them coming on, and also give a bit of a pause because people can't always get in immediately because we ask them to mute everything. That's another thing that from that very first meeting, some people weren't muting, so there was some background noises. I think we got a siren going off at one point in the street coming into the meeting. So after that, we always ask people that they do mute themselves, but then they need time to unmute themselves.
Yeah.
And then it takes a minute before the cameras seem to go on the person, because it seems to me, in order for you to come up for the screen when there's a lot of people on, you basically have to speak. Then the camera puts the camera on you, or maybe Michael does, because I'm not controlling it. Michael's like a TV producer apparently now. He has to make sure all these different elements work. So I just need to give it time and then it works. So I would say being patient and having your list of people there that you know the order of proceedings so that you can call them in at the right time. But I had absolutely no problem. Everybody knew who was supposed to speak next. The only time it got really a little bit tricky is when some of the councillors, when we had not the live stream meeting, they don't say who they are, who's coming in. So you have to wait for their picture to come up to know who it is.
Right, okay.
Because they can ask questions at any time. They're not on a list. So
Right.
I think an improvement I would suggest is that the councillors do say who they are when they want to ask their questions.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose you could prompt that as well.
And we will do that in the future.
Yeah. How are you handling voting? If I could just ask particularly.
Well, once I move the motion, then Michael takes over and he asks each a member of the planning committee individually, are they for or against? And that's when they have to unmute. Their picture then comes up and they say their vote. So that's slower. Can't sort of do a show of hands,
No.
which is quick. But on the other hand, I don't disagree with it, even though it takes time, because it shows how important it is that each individual member is casting their vote. If it was just a show of hands in the council chamber, I'm not even sure that everybody who's observing can clearly see what's going on down at the front where the members sit. But it's very clear what's going on in a virtual meeting. I don't know if Mike would like to add something on that.
I think some of the points Trish raised are absolutely spot on, if I'm honest. The difference between a virtual meeting and a more traditional physical meeting is one of orchestrating the meeting more than anything. It does feel very much like you're producing almost a TV program. So from the participation point of a member or an officer or a member of the public, it has to go very much in sequence, and also you have to allow time for the technology to catch up, which what would otherwise seem like a normal, straightforward conversation. Trish has commented in terms about the voting process, and it's a very valid point actually. For the virtual meetings, it's much more visible for the participants. So for whoever is talking at that point in time, you are live on screen. You're at the center of the live feed, so it's quite clear who's talking, and it's much more focused and clearer. And because of advising and reminding people to mute your microphones for clarity, it means it's a much more clear environment to actually discuss the issues and identify what the problems are. So yes, there are challenges associated with it, but also actually it's a lot of opportunity as well. For example, we hold our meetings in the council chamber in Liverpool Town Hall, and the capacity for that typically is probably take about 80 to 90 members of the public to watch the committee. As Trish mentioned earlier, we had over 300 people watching our first virtual live stream meeting. So instantly you're reaching a much wider audience, and also you're not having the travel requirement for people. So it makes it that bit more accessible.
Yeah, the benefits for engagement are potentially quite high, aren't they? So, Tricia, what are your sort of top tips? What have you learned the most?
It's really important to get your members happy with this to start with. So I sent them lots of emails. I phoned them up and said, you need to get your Wi-Fi checked out. We're going to have dummy runs. Going to have people phoning you from ICT. Have all your problems ready to tell them about.
Right.
But I thought the most important thing was that we did have a dummy run of the committee. Not at the very, very outset, but eventually we did. And I think that was really important, because I also feel that some people are very technology literate and very happy with it, and some people aren't, but people don't particularly like to admit that they're not happy with things, especially if they've got problems with their Wi-Fi or their computers. They tend to blame themselves when it might not be anything to do with that. So you need to test the system out. I do know that one councillor who came in as a guest, she just thought that it was her technology, her Wi-Fi, and I think it was a council laptop that were up the wall. But I don't think it was. I think it was other wider technical issues that we were having about, as Michael said, validating before you came in and so on. But then people get very panicky because it's very instant, isn't it? This virtual technology, it either works or it doesn't. And when it doesn't work, you think, well, what is the problem? And it seems unsolvable at the time. And you don't want that happening on the day or evening planning meeting. You want all that sorted out first. Once it's sorted out, everything gets to be a lot easier in many ways. You haven't got to get ready, get up and go out the door and you know, get to the meeting on time. You can relax a bit more. You can even have a cup of tea at the side, you know. So in some ways, there's an ease to it, but not if you haven't got your technology up and working and your Wi-Fi is not good.
Okay, brilliant. Michael, what advice would you give the other producers out there?
It's very simple, really. Preparation is key for every single one of these meetings. Trish alluded to some of the challenges we faced in terms of the technology and some of the issues which can happen in terms of connecting or connections dropping out or people struggling to actually join initially. What I would say for anyone hosting a virtual committee meeting, the thing of advice, first of all, is obviously you have your published start time when your live feed will start, but I'd strongly encourage colleagues to schedule the members and the participants in terms of officers to join not less than 20 minutes before the published live feed. It gives time then to test your connections, make sure everything's working, and ensure everyone's quite clear how the meeting will be conducted.
Brilliant. Could I ask you both just one question, I suppose it's a technical issue in a way, about you know, it's when someone's internet drops in and out or they can't be heard, there is a potential that they don't hear all of the debate, and that might have an effect on their ability to vote. Have you had any technical issues like that you've had to overcome or deal with on the spot?
We have had a few minor issues, but what we do is quite simple. We would ask the member to repeat their particular comments once we've re-established the connection, so it's quite clear for all concerned that everyone's then had the opportunity to hear and be heard.
Excellent. Tricia.
The thing is that when there have been a few glitches, we've now, you know, got better at dealing with it all. We've told people to unjoin and then rejoin, but we also telephone them. You know, that's really useful. You need to have all your people, either officers or members, you need to have all their phone numbers all set up so that you can easily get hold of them.
Yeah.
And that helps a lot to get on the telephone to people when they're having problems, and then you can talk them through and get them back on. And as Michael says, then it can be repeated so they're clear on the voting patterns. I'd also like to add that I think it has been really good about other people coming in, both people who are just observing, but people who want to come along and object. I think it's much easier for people to object from their own home. It must be quite difficult at times coming into the council chamber. A lot of people don't know their way around the town hall. There are some people who don't even know where the town hall is. So that is a big barrier for them to have their say. It's a lot easier to have your say from home as long as you can sort out the video conference on your laptop, your phone or your iPad. And I noticed that we've had a lot of participation from the public. And the other thing is that they don't seem to repeat themselves as much as I noticed they do in the council chamber. We get a queue of people in the council chamber who have to come to the front. It all takes a lot of time sometimes, especially if they're elderly or disabled, to actually get to the front. And then a lot of them say the same thing as somebody else said.
Right.
I noticed that's gone down. They don't seem to be repeating themselves. Maybe because they're sitting at home, they're more relaxed. They've seen somebody else has already said that, and they think, oh, well, I better say something a little bit different.
It's been really interesting. As I say, I've done a couple of these, and you know, the points you've made are slightly different to some of the other points that have been made. So we're getting some good body of knowledge here. So thank you ever so much, Tricia and Michael, for sharing. And good luck with the rest of your planning committees as you go forward.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Anybody else is trying it as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
See you soon.
Martin.
Bye bye. See you, Michael.
Thank you. Cheers, Martin.